we're going to start. Thank you, Wanda. Go ahead.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come tonight, Father God, just to say thank you, Lord God. Thank you, God, for today, God. God, we thank you for each and every person that's in this meeting on tonight. Lord God, we just continue to pray for the Carter family right now, God. But God, we also lift up our president to you, Father God. God, I ask that you would continue to strengthen him, Father God, and give him what he stands in need of, Father God. And oh God, we ask that you would continue to bless each and one of us. Let us continue to love one another as you have loved us. It's our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Dunkley. Everyone who registered, I believe, should have already received a copy of the agenda. But I'm going to go ahead and share this for just a second. Okay. So we're going to go ahead. You should see this now. Meeting minutes. We're going to go right into our prayer, roll call of officers. We're going to suspend the rules, financial report, then I'm going to have a few remarks. Okay, so Madam Secretary, go ahead with the roll call.
Okay, we have President Spain, who's present.
Yeah.
Second Vice President, Sharice Kearns.
Present.
Third Vice President, Michael Heminger. Treasurer, Roy Austin.
Present.
Assistant Treasurer, Adriana Spain.
Present.
I'm Secretary Wanda Younger, present. Assistant Secretary, Laurel Langhorne.
Present.
Executive Committee at Large, Karen Nightingale.
Present.
Executive Committee at Large, James Younger.
Present.
Executive Committee at Large, Simone Walker.
Present.
Communications, Leah Matterall. Criminal Justice, Heather Kelly. Megan Brew is excused absence. Economic Development and Labor, Maya Jones. Environmental and Climate Justice, Kenyatta Clements. Environmental and Climate Justice, Ron Haddix. Housing, Kellen Macbeth.
Present.
Housing, Brian Coleman.
Present.
Political Action, Jamie Abrams.
Present.
Political Action, Megan Razor.
Present.
Religious Affairs, Pastor Davis.
Present.
Religious Affairs, Rosa Dunkley is present. Scholarship, Adore Williams. And that concludes roll call.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. So we're going to, there is a name missing tonight. And I think most folks on this call realize what has transpired since our last meeting. We lost a very good person, dear friend of mine for nearly over a decade, first vice president of this branch of the NAACP, Kent Carter. Kent will be definitely missed in more ways than just the NAACP. You know, I have talked extensively over the weeks about the difference between volunteerism, advocacy, and just getting to know a person for who they are. And I can say without any hesitation that I know Kent very well, long before he started his journey in the NAACP. And I know his family quite well. And if you did not get to know him very well, he was a sincere, genuine person, very calm-mannered, not one for arguments and confrontation, a true introvert, and a sense of reason. He knew how to balance, you know, his work here in the NAACP and what he did out in the world, supporting his family, and more importantly, you know, his livelihood. A combat veteran, one who served our country in some dangerous places, a former federal agent, and got into the real estate market where he made a lot of friends, many of whom I knew as well. We're going to miss him. And for those of you that can make it, he will be memorialized this Saturday at 2 p.m. Excuse me, at 11 o'clock p.m. a.m. at Mount Olive Baptist Church, viewing will be from 10 to 11. And then he will be laid to rest in Tennessee on Tuesday. But there'll be more to be said about Kent and his contributions to the branch of the NAACP and his life in general as we celebrate that on Saturday. So for now, let's take a moment to reflect, think about not only Kent, his daughter, his loved ones in Tennessee that he's left behind, but those that are continuing every night to ache because of this loss, this tragic loss. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We are going to continue with our meeting tonight. We have some administrative issues to get through, items to get through, but first we're going to suspend the rules to accept the agenda that is laid forth. Let me see here, get this up. Let me go ahead and launch this. Those of you that have been attending our meeting, you've seen the agenda, you can accept, nay, abstain. I'm launching the poll right now. I'll give you 30 seconds. This is a suspend the normal rules of the agenda and accept what we have laid forward. Please mute yourselves. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll, Madam Secretary. I'm gonna share the results. 97% have accepted. Do you have that captured, Madam Secretary?
I do not see the results on my screen.
Oh, it says stop. It says sharing on my end. So give me a second. Can you see it now? No?
No, I cannot.
Okay. We'll just go with a screen capture. Can you capture this? It doesn't matter. I got it. All right. Let me put this to the side. We're going to go now into our, let me see here, our financial report. Treasurer, are you ready?
Yes, Mr. President.
All right. Let me grab this report here. You can go ahead and start.
Okay, for the month of August 2022, the financial report is as follows. In our business savings account, the beginning balance was $356,841.39. There was one withdrawal for $60,500. I will explain that in a minute. The ending balance, $296,341.39. In our checking account, the beginning balance, $26,244,065. There were 5 deposits totaling $85,068.50. Of that, the $60,500 was deposited and an additional $24,000 from the Britain Foundation. The ending balance in our checking account, $76,744.97. The total balance at the end of August for both accounts, $373,086.36. That concludes the report.
Okay, Mr. Treasurer, thank you for that report. This report was also approved by the Executive Committee at our last meeting. If you have additional questions about the treasury report or would like a copy, please reach out to the treasurer. As a member, you are entitled to a copy of the report and to ask any questions you may have. All right, we're going to move on. I think next on our agenda is to receive. No, before we go there, I do want to share, let me just make note of this. You should have seen the active membership by membership type. Received that. We're at 1,124. The numbers continue to increase. We have some reports from our political action and our housing committee. So good job, everyone, in that regard. Keep up the amazing work. We also, just to let you know, we're going to have nominations, which our communication team has already put out. We are accepting nominations just like we did last year for those individuals who wish to nominate anyone for an award here at the NAACP. Our Freedom Fund banquet for 2022 will be virtual on Wednesday, December 14th from 7 to 9 p.m. So those of you that attended last year know we were pretty efficient and had a really good job with that. So more information will be flowing by way of our email distro and also on our social media page. So again, if you know of someone out there in our community who you would like to nominate for an award, please do so and send that in to us. Also, the guest of honor, guest speaker this year will be Karen Boykins, who is the vice chair of NAACP National. She has agreed to be our chair, our guest of honor. More details to follow on that. Okay, I think now what we have on the agenda, this is the month for us to receive a report from the nomination committee for any individual or individuals that have put their name in the hat for consideration for the 2023-2024 administration. So I'm going to turn the floor over to the nomination committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wanda, do you want me to share my screen or do you have the report ready to pull up?
If you can share your screen.
Absolutely. All right, so good evening, everybody. We will be giving the nominating committee report here. So the committee of the Arlington branch NAACP is pleased to submit the following nominations. For president, Michael Heminger. First vice president, James Younger. Second vice president, Brian Coleman. Third vice president, Laurel Langhorne. Secretary, Wanda Younger. Assistant secretary, Kathleen McSweeney. Treasurer, Adriana Spain. Assistant treasurer, Kenya Pennington. And 3 members for members of the executive committee, Nadia Conyers, Kellen Macbeth, and Karen Nightingale. Wanda, you've got all of the forms with signatures for your review, and I'm happy to answer any questions from anybody.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair of the Nomination Committee. You and your committee did a great job getting those names in and those applications, I would say. Those names will be submitted to National NAACP for elections in November. Those names will come out on a ballot that will be sent to every member who is in good standing of the NAACP here at Arlington branch. Again, every member, if you're a member of the NAACP in this branch and you are active and your email is correct and your cell phone number is correct, you will receive an email from National NAACP on or about, I think it's the 17th, Madam Secretary, of November. Maybe that date's off.
Yes.
Yes, and it's going to be a 4-hour window. You are to participate via Election Buddy and choose and make your selection. National NAACP will send the results back, I'm assuming everyone, at the end of that cutoff time. Those names will be read at our the following meeting of the general membership. And whoever is elected will be sworn into office in December, and they will begin their duty, their roles on January 1st. Okay, they will begin on January 1st. For all appointed members of the NAACP, just so the membership knows, their positions, their duties end December 31st, 2022, December 31st of this year, 2022. Okay, so there will be a new administration, there'll be new leadership at the elected positions and probably in your committees. If you have thoughts about serving on a committee, maybe a committee that has not been stood up, maybe a committee that has been stood up at this branch of the NAACP, I would urge you to give that some consideration and speak with the new leadership when they come in to see where you can be put or would like to work. Okay. All right. With that being said, thank you. We are going to have to do one other thing here. Polls. Just a second. So with that, we are going to the election of, since we are having elections by way of election buddy this year, we technically, for a matter of record, have to have what we call the election supervisory committee. The roles of the election supervisory committee are not as set forth in the current bylaws of the NAACP because National NAACP is conducting elections. That being said, it is still required that we have individuals that they can contact as members of the election supervisory committee, should there be any questions from National. And so what we have agreed to do is use the individuals, those who are on the nomination committee that are not running or seeking office, to put their names forward as members of the election supervisory committee for National. And with that being said, I'm gonna launch a poll because the members have to vote on that. You can either accept, not accept, or abstain. Again, there will be an election supervisory committee. These individuals will be the point of contact for National NAACP should there be any issues or concerns about elections. I'm launching the poll. Political Action Committee, are you about ready to get started here in a minute? I see you, Jan Marie. All right, good. %55% have participated in the poll. I'm gonna give you another 10 seconds. All right, I'm gonna end the poll, share the results. Madam Secretary, can you see this?
I cannot.
Okay, I'll share it again. All right, 83%. Can you see it, Bill or Jammarie? Can you see what I'm sending you? Okay, you can see it, but Wanda, something must be going on with your computer over there, okay? Because everyone else seems to be able to see it. All right, let me go ahead and capture this. All right, I think we are good. Okay, before we go into our form here tonight, just let me set a few ground rules. I'll be on the background, behind the scenes, they say, but I just want to lay this out for the NAACP. Keep in mind that the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. All right, the NAACP does not endorse candidates or parties. However, individuals of the NAACP in their personal capacity can decide to choose to support a candidate for any party, independent, libertarian, Republican, Democrat, Green Party, whatever they want in their personal capacity. But when they do so, they need to keep in mind that they do not reflect the position of the NAACP. Okay? They do not reflect the position of the NAACP because we don't endorse political candidates. For tonight's forum, which will be led by our Political Action Committee, I would ask that you just listen attentively to what the candidates may say as questions are being asked. We had a forum roundtable hosted by Black Parents of Arlington and our Education Committee this weekend. I believe that it was shared today. I have to get with the comms team, but that was about an hour and a half. There were some good questions asked pointedly to members of who are running for school board. I would encourage you to go to our YouTube page or to Black Parents of Arlington's page and review and listen and watch that exchange of conversation, because it's going to give you a bit more in-depth conversations or thoughts about where these candidates for school board may be. But for the purpose of tonight, and in keeping what we've done in the past, we have some questions prepared for the county board and school board candidates. And these questions will not be singular in scope. We will not spend our entire, 30 minutes talking about the missing middle housing study, because in Arlington, there's more things going on than just the missing middle, all right? So I applaud the Political Action Committee and their hard work. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over into good hands with our one and only Jan Marie. Jan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Arlington branch of the NAACP and our Political Action Committee, I would like to welcome you to our County Candidate Forum. My name is Jan Marie Pena, and I'm a volunteer with our Political Action Committee. I've been a volunteer for 2 years, where I've mainly supported with voter registration and other civic education and engagement initiatives. Programs like the forum we're hosting tonight are vital to our civic engagement. We hope to have an informative conversation with the candidates that will allow you to leave the program engaged, informed, and prepared to vote. As a reminder, again, the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization. As such, we do not make any endorsements, and we welcome all candidates. We are not advocating today. This program is really about engagement and education. So one of our PAC team members is going to drop a link in the chat that will direct you to more info on the upcoming elections, including the candidates, questions that will appear on the ballot, and how to vote. So just to describe our format for today, we'll start with a discussion with 3 county board candidates, followed by a discussion with 2 school board candidates. And during each discussion, we'll ask a series of questions that are important to the NAACP mission, rotating who answers first. The chat will be disabled during the forum, but you can share any questions you have directly with the host. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight, our branch secretary, Mrs. Wanda Younger. Wanda is a longtime Arlington resident and has contributed three decades to our community as a public servant. She is also a Silver Life member of the NAACP, and we are so thrilled to have her as our moderator for tonight's discussions. So with that, I will pass it off to Wanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan Marie. I'd like to introduce the 3 candidates for County Board: the Honorable Matt Ferranti, Audrey, Clement, and Adam Theo. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. For this portion, I'm going to ask a series of questions, and there will not be formal opening or closing statements. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. We will jump in when your time is up. Like we previously mentioned, we will rotate who answers each question first. Now, let's begin with our first question. And it's as if you had already been elected to the county board. Let's fast forward ahead 4 years and imagine that you are reflecting back on your term. What legacy would you like to leave? And we will start with Mr. Ferranti.
It's a great question, and one that I have been thinking of a little bit more these past couple of weeks. Fundamentally, I had two goals when I served as chair, and the second is really the legacy I'd like to leave, which is a systematic commitment to a more equitable community. I'll just share, I think honestly, Parissa speaks quite movingly of this in quoting Dr. King with respect to the beloved community. I think that we have a compassionate community, an inclusive community, but that doesn't mean that we have equality of opportunity and equality, fairness with respect to outcomes in Arlington. So specifically 4 years from now, I would like to have led a process to improve the care and system, the criminal justice system with respect to our jails. I think we made progress on our police, but our jails are obviously the NAACP in this branch, which I'm proud to be a member, has highlighted that we need some change and we need some progress with respect to the care of those in our jails. So that is a specific outcome. I'd also like for an economy that is much more inclusive. And I think we'll talk about housing specifically. We have 197 people who are homeless, and that's disproportionately our Black residents in that group as well as in our jails. So we need to address.
Last time.
Sure.
Okay, next, Ms. Clement.
Well, there are two issues that currently concern me about the current county board, and that is a lack of transparency and a lack of fiscal constraint. I am a fiscal conservative, and so I will, if elected, I will scrutinize every year's budget with respect to both expenditures and revenues. And one of the reforms that I would like to implement in evaluating what goes into the budget is something called fiscal impact analysis, where the costs and benefits of every major county expenditure are weighed for balance. That would be my first priority. My second priority is transparency. For example, earlier this year, the county board adopted what most people would consider a very laudable expenditure, and that was the investment of $150 million as a loan to facilitate the purchase of the Barcroft Apartments. Now, most people would say that was a great deal, but I'm concerned about it because there was another major investor, and that was Amazon, who contributed at least as much or more money to that venture. Another very little known detail about that investment was the fact that the assessed value of the property at that time was only.
Okay, Mr. Theo.
Sure. Thank you, Wanda and NAACP for having us here. I know that we are going to delve a little bit more into missing middle later on, and we definitely don't want the entire forum to be dominated by that. But ultimately, housing affordability and housing options is what all of this sort of circles back to. After 4 years in office, I want housing affordability to be my chief accomplishment. And that runs the gamut, the full range of everything. Missing middle housing with townhomes and garden condos for the middle class, for our workforce. It's also committed affordable housing for lower income folks. I want to double the AHIF fund, the Affordable Housing Investment Fund. In addition to that, I want to open up that AHIF fund to be able to establish and invest in community land trusts for affordable home ownership. That is desperately needed. And that's the missing gap that we really have here in Arlington between our committed affordable housing rentals and our $2 million, $3 million McMansions that are going up everywhere. We need that opportunity for affordable home ownership to be able to have all folks be able to pass down generational wealth, to build equity in their property, and to be able to get a leg back up here in very expensive Arlington. And of course, we can't leave out people who are suffering from homelessness. That's something that I've gone through myself twice in my life. First down in Florida, and then most recently during the Snowmageddon. Thank you.
All right, moving on to our next question is going to involve community policing. The Community Oversight Board has adopted its bylaws and is completing its training assisted by the Arlington County Police Department. What concrete steps will you take, one, to ensure maximum transparency in the Community Oversight Board processes, and two, to meaningfully engage community stakeholders who are disproportionately policed in developing policing policies? And this time we'll start with Ms. Clement.
Community policing is generally defined as a law enforcement philosophy that allows officers to continuously operate in the same area in order to create a stronger bond with the citizens living and working there. This allows public safety officers to engage with local residents and prevent crime from happening instead of responding to incidents after they occur.
Ms. Clement, if I can just interrupt, what we're looking for are pointed responses. And the first question is, what concrete steps would you take to ensure maximum transparency in the Community Oversight Board? And two, to meaningfully engage community stakeholders who are disproportionately policed in developing policing policies. So we're looking for.
All right, well, okay, I
responses.
believe I've been responding to the second question. So regarding, so I believe that community policing is the solution to people who are not treated properly by the police as we understand it today. And then regarding the Community Oversight Board, I would solicit input, regular input from citizens who have issues with the way they have been, if they have complaints against the police department, to come forward with those complaints in a forthright manner.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Next, we'll go to Mr. Theo.
Sure. Regarding the transparency first, I'm looking forward to very much the tenure of Ms. Ibrahim as the police auditor for Arlington County. I think that's an excellent choice. However, I'm very disappointed that the Arlington County Board did not go with the original structure of the Community Oversight Board as originally proposed by the Police Practices Work Group, instead going for this singular police auditor position instead of a broader empowered board of community citizens that could determine police oversight. So that can still be rectified over time, and I'd like to do that. When it comes to the issues of, I guess, demographics being overly policed, I want to automate our traffic and parking enforcement as much as possible to remove that opportunity for police officers interacting with people in a potentially biased manner. I think that right there, that first step of interactions goes a long way to solving the problem. It's not a silver bullet, of course, but automating our parking and traffic enforcement as much as possible and removing, say, noise ordinances that are, predominantly targeted towards certain communities goes a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ferranti?
Sure. Thank you for the specific and thoughtful question. It has taken a long time for the training to get done. There's been pretty extensive training. And for transparency purposes, we need to have more over the coming 3-5 months. We need more sustained and thorough engagement with those outside of the 7 resident and 2 former law enforcement, but not the full Community Oversight Board needs to engage more thoroughly. We've talked a little bit, as I'm one of the liaisons to the Oversight Board, about a systematic approach to engaging with communities more thoroughly. There have been some initial meetings, but it's not sufficient. So I think we may need to tweak the amount of training. We need people who have an understanding in every case of the process, but the amount of training may be too heavy, and we need to move quickly towards deeper community engagement with a systematic approach over the next 3 to 5 months. With respect to the overall approach here, I was disgusted, frankly, with the governor's veto of our effort to have direct oversight by the county board of, and I worked very hard to get that provision along with the subpoena power in the oversight board legislation. But I was disgusted by the governor's veto, sort of the first indication, I think, that he was running for president.
That's time.
Oh,
Thank you. Our next question is surrounding housing. Describe exclusionary zoning in Arlington. Do you believe it is rooted in systemic racism? And we'll start with Mr. Theo.
This is an easy answer. Yes, it was most definitely rooted in systemic racism. Back in the 1940s and 50s, most neighborhoods in Arlington and America were, you were allowed to build small apartments with townhouses, with single-family homes, with duplexes, all in the same neighborhood. But starting post-war, our nation had the bright idea, it seems, to designate big swaths of our residential areas as only allowing the most expensive type of housing, single-family homes. That, of course, as we all know, the struggle of race and struggle of class are very much intertwined. And the nation decided, and Arlington County decided, to go the route of using class as a backdoor to racism. What we need to do now is undo those exclusionary zoning policies. It's not a silver bullet that will fix things right away, but at least allows us to catch up to where we should have been all along.
Thank you, Mr. Theo. Next, Mr. Ferranti.
I think the evidence is clear on this, that exclusionary zoning in Arlington was inextricably linked with systematic racism. And the history of the country, Supreme Court decided that restrictive covenants, racially restrictive covenants, were illegal. In, I think, 1917, 4 or 5 years later, single-family zoning came system-wide. And if you look at that case, there was actually language in Euclid versus Ambler Realty that was clear that there was bias against renters as a whole class, and that's very concerning. In Arlington, we prohibited row houses, as is shown in the missing middle, one of the missing middle compendia studies, for over 20 years. And beyond that, the color of law shows that we had systematic racism underlying HUD loans. So there's little doubt about the history. And in Virginia, there's also, we can't do what we should be able to do, which is stricter and stronger inclusionary zoning, because of the bird machine and the long history of racism in our system of power in Virginia government. So we need to revise our own ordinance to do more on inclusionary funding for housing. And we need to work hard at this at both the affordable housing, committed affordable housing level through housing affordability. And that's why I support thoughtful changes to move forward.
Thank you. And Ms. Clement?
Yes, well, I certainly would not dispute that exclusionary zoning had its roots in systematic racism. However, I would dispute that missing middle upzoning of residential neighborhoods wholesale across the county is the solution. According to the county's own data, a household must earn at least $108,000 a year to qualify for the smallest one-bedroom unit in an 8-plex. Yet the county's race and ethnicity dashboard indicates that Black and Latino median household income is only a fraction of that. So these folks will not be able to benefit from the housing to be derived from missing middle upzoning.
But Ms. Clement, not to interrupt you, that's actually going to be part of our next question. But for this particular question, we just wanted you to describe exclusionary zoning. And I believe you answered whether it was rooted, and whether you believe it's rooted in systemic racism. But our follow-up will be about.
All right, yeah. So I certainly agree with that proposition. I don't have any difficulty with acknowledging that point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clement. And for our next question, which is also housing, What is your position on the missing middle? What level of density did you support in single-family neighborhoods and why? And we'll start with Mr. Ferranti.
Thank you for the question. So I support missing middle, and I support thoughtful ways forward to work on this, to make measurable and important progress. I support duplexes, triplexes, and quads. With respect to 5 and 6 plexes, I'm still working that through. I want to acknowledge here tonight that I misspoke, and I apologize for that last week in the details of how I was describing what we can do to move forward on 5 and 6 plexes. I do not support 8 plexes because I believe that that they're likely to be 1 bedroom, 1 bath. And I think that the costs in terms of our ability to implement this policy are greater at this stage than the benefits of it. We absolutely should continue transit-oriented development, and that is a great way that we can fulfill our significant need for housing supply for 1 bedroom, 1 bath. I think starter homes and step-down homes for seniors who want to downsize, we must do this. I'm committed to it. I want to re-emphasize that rental housing is where we must focus our resources, our budget itself. I agree that we need to go from about 24 to about 50 million in AHIF. That's a very significant investment, Affordable Housing Investment Fund. But I know what it's like to fight for renters, and I did so with the Serrano all last year.
Okay, and I know that's time, but I just had a follow-up question, Mr. Ferranti. When you said you're still working through 5 and 6 plexes, what exactly more do you think is needed for you to make a decision?
Well, with this week, there was the realtors had a session on Portland, Oregon, which has required 2 of the 6 units to be affordable at 80% of area median income and below. I want to look into that a little bit more. I also want to have a way forward that protects against some concerns, but is not a use permit approach. I think instead we can do a use standard that we can move forward with findings on some issues, so that, for example, we can address some concerns that I don't think are the bulk of the problem. But that additional work is what I want to do. And I think it's important for me to have thought it all the way through before arriving at a conclusion there. But I do absolutely believe we need additional supply, and we need to desegregate significant portions of our county economically and racially.
Thank you for that. Ms. Clement?
Well, I oppose missing middle. It will definitely produce more housing, and that more housing will be unaffordable. Second, I want to disabuse people of several myths about it. First, that it will redress racial inequities by providing affordable housing. According to the county's own data, a household will have to earn over $100,000 a year to qualify for the smallest 1 bedroom unit in an 8-plex. Yet the county has reported Black and Latino median household income at just a fraction of that. Myth number 2, missing middle will provide more home buying opportunities for people who can afford it. Not so. The county projects that 90% of new units will be 1 to 2 bedrooms already in good supply, not the 3 bedroom units that are needed. And 80% of those will be rentals, not owner occupied. Myth number 3, only 20 lots a year will be redeveloped as missing middle, so the impacts will be negligible. The county has refused to show where it got this number, but the impacts of missing middle on schools, parking, traffic runoff, and tree canopy could be enormous. The flipping of properties by out-of-state investors will inflate land values and real estate assessments, displacing moderate income residents and leaving the rest with a huge tax burden. Myth 4, tree canopy of 20 to 50% is achievable. Not so. According to the Arlington Tree Action Group, the tree canopy replacement requirement will be slashed in half by state law, potentially impacting 60% of Arlington's tree canopy. Implementation of only 20% of the planned rezoning would remove trees from an area the size of 9 Pentagon parking lots. So those are just 4 of the myths surrounding this invidious practice.
Okay, and Ms. Clement, just one follow-up question. Do you support any level of density in single-family neighborhoods?
You mean increased density in single-family neighborhoods?
Yes.
According to current zoning law, and I definitely would consider incremental rezoning, particularly along transit corridors, but not wholesale rezoning of the entire county. No.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. And Mr. Theo?
Sure, my favorite topic this year. Yes, I'm very much for missing middle. I am the most pro missing middle candidate running this year, with Audrey, Clement completely opposed to anything and everything, and Matt Ferranti sort of taking the 50% route on this. With missing middle, especially countywide, it has to be done countywide. There's no way that we can allow this zoning reform to just be piecemeal along transit corridors, bus routes, and metro corridors, which is just another code for let's overly develop South Arlington and leave the single family McMansions in North Arlington alone. It has to be done countywide. And this is just the start of where I sort of strongly, vehemently disagree with Audrey, not just on her policies, but also her style. What she listed out there, the myths and the problems, that's what's called a Gish Gallop.
And Mr. Theo, if I can just, quickly interrupt, we just want to hear what your thoughts are as opposed to the other candidates' thoughts.
Definitely. So with missing middle, it has to be done countywide, and it has to be allowed all the way up to 8 plexes on lots that can handle it. Without the 8 plexes, which up until this year were called garden condos and garden apartments and were beloved and cherished by everyone. Now those are the ones that are the most affordable options for missing middle, and to rule out 8 plexes, these garden condos, is undercutting the main purpose of missing middle housing reform.
Thank you, Mr. Theo. Our next question is going to involve education. Education, politics, and policies have become toxic and political at the local level in ways that undermine the education of Black and Brown children disproportionately. If you had to score Arlington public education as a whole, how well it is serving the needs of the community of color, what score would you give on an A through F scale and why? And what concrete steps would you take to make improvements? Ms. Clement.
Well, I would give it a D because of the disparity in the achievement gap of Latino and Black students relative to whites. I believe I'm not an educationist, and I am not at this time in my life a teacher, but I suspect that that the persistent and growing achievement gap between minority students and white reflects a problem in the methodology of teaching as it has been adopted over the past at least decade. And I suspect that that methodology has something to do with rote learning, that and maybe even associated with STEM, although I do support STEM. In other words, I think that if serious thought were given to the current methodology used in the state of Virginia's public schools, that some change or modification of it might result in a lowering of the achievement gap in our schools.
And what steps would you take to make improvements with the remaining time you have left?
Well, the problem with that is I don't want to be overly prescriptive because I'm not currently a teacher. I have taught at the college level many years ago. I have not taught at the middle or elementary levels. So I'm unsure to what methodology changes I would make.
Thank you. Mr. Theo?
Sure. So Arlington County Public Schools does excellent for those students that are already well off and in neighborhoods that are already wealthy. For communities of color, I would say it's a solid D on that scale, unfortunately. The big challenges there, the big problems is, first of all, the gerrymandering of school boundaries and borders often does not play out in favor of Black and brown students. The borders have, especially lately, had some issues and setbacks with adjustments that I haven't liked. But I don't want to get too much into that because that is very much a school board issue. And I, even though very opinionated on the issue, I don't want to cross that legal boundary of a county board member trying to prescribe a school board issue. What the county board can do and should do with the school board and with APS is transparency. We have the muscle on the county board through the pocketbook, through the budget, to strengthen some transparency measures, especially with decision-making and with processes and procedures that APS and the school board use in order to come to their decisions and make those changes. So it is shining a light on things, especially with the Career Center. I think that that has been sort of a messy situation, which did not need to be a messy situation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ferranti?
Thank you for the question. It's a very important one. I too would give a D. It has been a few years, probably 5, since I was involved. I was chair of the school budget committee, and I also, during that year where I was chair, I did an analysis looking at the outcomes by subgroups, and Black Parents of Arlington produces an annual 1-pager or 2-pager that is devastating. And it's not just the gaps between our affluent, our white students and our African-American students, our white students and our Latino students that are average or below average by comparison with the rest of the state. In this one, Mr. Theo is right that we do decently well for the most affluent, but that's not sufficient. That's not the community we want to be. So we have to address that. And in many places, I haven't looked at the achievement data recently, but they are still persistent. And I'm worried that there may be even bigger in Arlington. What would I do about it? I would invest in our teachers. Fiscal conservatism this past year would have meant not giving teachers the raise that they need. We need to hold teachers accountable for doing excellent work, but we also need to invest in them. We need to fix our summer school program so that it addresses those most in need. I want to work with Mary Cadera to do that. And we need to work on child hunger. I'll work with Bethany Sutton. I've already been working on hunger, but we need an additional staff person there because kids cannot learn well when they are hungry. Those are all steps that I need to do. I take responsibility to try and do more.
Thank you. Our next question is an environmental question. Communities of color are often disproportionately impacted by poor environmental decisions based on where their communities sit. How will you work to ensure that current and future climate and infrastructure investments benefit marginalized communities? And we'll begin with Mr. Theo.
Our roads, our pedestrian bridges, our bike lanes, our schools, recreation centers are excellent in North Arlington. I mean, after all, we just spent an ungodly amount on the new HB Woodlawn. It's a beautiful school, but I think South Arlington schools and facilities need some TLC now. What can we do about that though? Because it's really just fluffy words if we're just saying South Arlington needs attention. And we've been saying that for decades now. What we need are, first of all, county board members who have a focus and a priority with South Arlington. We need leaders that will set up community task forces. Although I'm skeptical of task forces, I think that if it includes community leaders and civic organizations that are focused on South Arlington, that is the way that we focus on South Arlington. Use the voices, use the activists, use the community leaders that are already here in our communities to lead Arlington County's infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ferranti.
Thank you for the question. I think we need to, we have, just in this past capital improvement plan, we started having a tool which mapped where different infrastructure projects were. We need that level of granular data so that we, our climate and infrastructure investments benefit minority communities. So that is, we need to keep working through that. We need to have I do think that the questions that the county has set up, who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing, how do we know, and what are we going to do about it? Those should be asked with respect to every infrastructure investment. On Columbia Pike, we have invested quite a bit, and we should, because historic underinvestment in South Arlington, of course, is unfortunately a huge problem. So those are a couple of steps. I also agree we need to be invested in facilities that are top-notch at our schools, as well as our parks across South Arlington and across the community where there's the greatest need. And so those are a couple of different steps. There is another step that I think is very important, that tree equity is important, because I think that we should invest in our environment, but in particular, heat islands and heat. We looked at our 10 neighborhoods most in need with greatest poverty, disproportionately of color, and there were not as many trees. And I do think that makes a difference. So we got a tree equity proposal from Eco Action Arlington that I think we should work with.
Thank you. And Ms. Clement?
Well, I'm a member of the Neighborhoods Advisory Committee, and this past week, the organization met, and the chair gave a presentation that showed the distribution of funds to various member community associations, and an overlay showing the percent of minorities in each one of those areas. And what it showed was a disparity in the distribution of neighborhood advisory funds to civic associations with larger concentrations of minorities. So so the Neighborhood Advisory Committee has not formalized any final plan as to how to redress those inequities, in part because a lot of the civic associations in underserved areas are also high rental areas where the landlord is essentially responsible for providing environmental amenities. But there is a concern and essentially a commitment to further investigating these inequities in order to redress them in the future. But I do have to say, I'm very cynical of county's claims that it. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Next question is regarding the economy. According to Census's 2017 Annual Business Survey, 3% and 6% of Arlington business owners with employees are Black and Latinx, compared to 9% and 16% of county residents, respectively. What contributes to lower rates of business ownership among Black and Brown residents? And if elected, how would you address the racial disparity in business ownership in our community? And we'll begin with Mr. Ferranti.
Thank you for the question. Those are significant disparities, and we need to address them. We have a history over the last 5 years of targeted, this doesn't include Amazon, but targeted investments in tech companies. And I really believe that we made the right decision 3 years ago as we entered the pandemic, and particularly with the decision on Amazon to pivot from those sorts of incentive programs to small business grants. So we gave 68% of our 3.74 million in grants rounds 1 and 2 that we did in the middle of COVID went to women and minority-owned businesses. Smaller targeted grants are critical. The biggest challenge we hear again and again, and I've heard it through the Northern Virginia Regional Commission as we work on these issues with respect to minority-owned businesses is access to capital. And so we need to provide that capital in addition to the biz launch and that we've been doing as technical expertise, but we need to be able to provide that capital. Mr. Karantonis has a good idea with respect to a revolving loan fund that could be more capital than the grants that we provided, which were targeted and smaller. But I think we did make a good choice. Other localities gave more or less bailouts to large hotels. We did not, because we didn't think that would actually help with their bottom line and grow our economy, and it wasn't the right thing to do. So we need to continue with the small business grants as a strategy too.
Thank you. Ms. Clement?
Well, okay, so I think the decline in ownership of minority businesses is in part the result of the rise of the big box stores. Mom and pop businesses of all types have been in decline for years due to their inability to compete with chains and big box stores. And then, of course, entered the pandemic, and then many of these businesses have been shuttered for good. I would continue the county's programs of grants and loans to small businesses as a way to redress that problem. But I also have another concern, and that is one of the biggest impediments to small and minority business is unaccountable and excessive increases in annual real estate tax assessments. This practice has forced the shuttering of a number of businesses in the R&B quarter. And if elected, I will ask the county auditor to activate an audit of the county's real estate assessment and appeals practices, which is listed in the auditor's work plan as a future project.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Mr. Theo?
Sure. With minority-owned businesses, one of the big problems that they're facing is access to capital, as Mr. De Ferranti mentioned. And also that they are being squeezed by high property taxes. Problem with the high property taxes is we have a very high commercial office vacancy rate right now, 21%. And we have to tackle that 21% vacancy, bring it down so that we don't continue blowing a hole in our tax revenue, and we can afford then to lower the tax rates for businesses and others. But really, the fundamental reason why minority-owned businesses continue to drop like flies here in Arlington and be pushed out and shut down is because they don't own the land, the property that they sit on most often. They are leasing land, they're leasing buildings. And when those buildings, when that land redevelops, those small businesses are pushed out along with so much of the neighborhood. What I would love to do is set up some sort of matchmaking at the very least, or a fund, a county fund for community land trusts for small businesses, or some sort of organization to where the small businesses themselves can band together, own the property, either that they're already at or some nearby piece of property they can relocate to and continue to have as their own. That right there is ultimately the only way that we're going to be able to protect our minority business owners, is helping them become owners not just of the business, but of the land as well.
This time. Thank you. Next question, advancing racial equity. In the past 2 years, the county appointed a chief race and equity officer who has started laying the groundwork for advancing racial equity efforts in the county government. How would you continue to build upon these racial equity efforts? Ms. Clement.
Well, first of all, I support the appointment of a racial and equity officer for the purpose of promoting programs that train people in racial sensitivity. In other words, a lot of the conflicts that have arisen of a biracial nature are due to the fact that officers and other government officials have not been provided with training or sensitivity training on the issue of race. If and when they are, I believe that promotes better relations between the races. And however, one of the things that I find that does not promote racial equity is one-party rule in this county. Just to give you an example, a couple years ago, we had an Asian running for county board in a Democratic primary. After his defeat, he was ridiculed by the Sun Gazette and advised never to run again. Now, to me, this was a clear example of racial insensitivity that was actually a function.
That's time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Mr. Theo.
So much of our county needs to do a better job at racial and economic inclusivity. I think, well, we often rely on DEI programs, and I think most of them are, well, kind of garbage. DEI programs are typically put together by corporations. They're packaged up, put a little bow and ribbon on them, and then they're pushed out. And then county agencies, businesses, and other organizations sort of purchase them and then use them. The problem is that most of the time they're just checklists and formulaic work exercises that don't really solve the problem. What we really need to do is incorporate a lot of our local civic organizations that deal with diversity and racial issues and economic issues, and incorporate them more into our county operations, to lean on them for advice, to include them in commissions and task forces, and to run actual solutions by them whenever we have everything from installing bike lanes and improving streets to neighborhood-wide economic development programs. We have the expertise here in Arlington County already when it comes to racial issues. Let's use that instead of these prepackaged DEI programs that rarely, almost never solve the actual problem.
Thank you. And Mr. Ferranti.
Thanks for the question. It's an important one. I think we need, Ms. Samia Bird is doing an excellent job. I think it's been good that we've been able to add one staff to her office. She is trying to set up systems so it's not just her office, but countywide this is an effort. And we have a number of departments. In each department there's work going on. But I think we need at least an additional staff person to help us address this more thoroughly. And then we need to consider whether in each major department like DES, CPHD, there are resources that are necessary. We have, as a county government, all of us now are taking courses to get better educated on issues of race. So those are steps we should take. I also think it's critical to be deeply inclusive in everything that you're working on. So not everyone agreed with me on the Civilian Oversight Board with respect to the police, but I did again and again seek to listen to your Criminal Justice Committee and others. And that's also true with respect to the immigration trust policy. Some advocates didn't agree with where I ended up, but we got 70–80% of the way there and really made a difference in some tightening up some policies. We need to be persistent and relentless on this work.
Thank you, Mr. Ferranti. Our next question is going to come from our branch president.
Well, hello, there's always a curveball, right? And I'm going to circle back to housing. The first question I have for you is this is just a yes or no. You all support increasing housing opportunities for Black residents here in Arlington. Is that a yes or no? Matt?
Yes.
Audrey?
Yeah.
Adam?
Yes, most definitely.
All right, so here we go. So if the median household income, right, here in Arlington is around $62,000, that means that like half of the Black residents make more than this amount. So if we're going to talk about proposing missing middle eightplexes, which we know provide the best opportunity for high income Black residents, how can eightplexes be left off of the missing middle housing proposal? Audrey, I think I know where you're going to head, but you can answer this question. How can we leave those off if you are saying you want to support opportunities for Black residents? We think this may be the NAACP, the best approach, best option.
I believe
Let's go with Go ahead, Audrey. You ready?
All right, all right.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think you got your numbers wrong. Median household income in Arlington County is double Black median household income. It's about 125,000. Some people have quoted 128,000 a year.
For
Okay.
Black residents.
Median household income across the board in the county is about 128,000.
Got that.
Median Black income last reported in 2019 was 62,000
Sure.
a year. So
Mhm.
Black median income is about half white median income. Yet the county's own data indicate that you have to have an income of at least $100,000 a year to qualify for the lowest end 1-bedroom rental unit in an 8-plex. Please do the math. Tell me how that benefits the majority of Black residents in this county. I would like to know.
Matt?
Yeah, I think that I take the point that this is a deeply held view. I actually believe that the biggest thing that I'll probably do with respect to equity and racial justice, at least in the past 4 years, was Barcroft Apartments, because I was meeting with residents today, and 1,334 units that would have gone market rate would have been well outside of affordable for many of the residents of color in the Barcroft Apartments. With respect to 8-plexes, no other county, no other place in the country has done 8-plexes yet. I understand the point that it would be, I disagree with Ms. Clement that there's all of a sudden at 108 to 109, that splits everything, and at 109,000, it doesn't have benefit. We should be working on that, but I do not think that, I think that approving additional supply in our corridors and in the Langston Boulevard corridor in particular can have huge benefits for equity. And we have to admit that there has not been enough units in North Arlington that are affordable. And we have to, I think that is more efficient, and that doesn't mean I'm perpetually at that place, but we have to end single family zoning barriers by right and allow duplexes, triplexes, quads, and we talked about the 6s. But I also think that we have to implement it in a way that is successful.
Yeah. Okay, Theo. And then I'll just end with something. Go ahead, Theo.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the only candidate that's running that is fully for the 8-plexes by right. And what really boggles me is that up until this year of missing middle, it seemed that we all cherished those 8-plexes. I mean, those are what's we used to call garden condos and garden apartments, the ones around Westover, of which Audrey lives in, and Colonial Village, and even some parts of the Barcroft Apartments match that. And those are the most affordable options for residents of Arlington County. But now we're wanting to, or at least some candidates are wanting to get rid of them entirely from the plan. That boggles my mind. If I can take an extra 30 seconds, I can talk about specifically what we can do above and beyond that to really tackle that issue.
You got 15. Yeah, I'll give you 15. Adam.
All right. So right now with missing middle, it follows the same rules as regular houses of capped at 35 feet height. I want to allow a little bit extra height for an extra story in exchange for some committed affordable housing units within those 8-plexes, so that we could do something similar with what we do high rises, of a certain percentage being committed affordable housing for low income folks.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna let y'all get back to it with the moderator, but what I'm not hearing, and what I don't think we've heard here at the NAACP, we can spend all the math we want, but no one is telling us how we can make homes more affordable for our Black and brown citizens here in Arlington. All right, we can spend the numbers all day long, but we need solution-oriented leaders. And how are we going to get there? All right, thank you very much for entertaining my question, and now back over to the moderator.
All right, we're at our last question. In your opinion, what is the single most important issue affecting Black and brown residents in Arlington? Please describe how you would prioritize this issue during your term, if elected, and what you would seek to accomplish. And we will begin with Mr. Theo.
Sure. I mean, police reform, criminal justice reform, big issue. But right now, I'd say the biggest issue is housing affordability. That is what is truly crushing and pressing out so many Black and brown residents out of Arlington County. The fact that they've been at the whim of high property taxes, yes, but that they can't afford to, keep their family, their loved ones here in Arlington County as they age and grow up. We've lost that multi-generational support for housing here for Black and brown residents here in Arlington County. So with missing middle housing, yes. With more committed affordable housing for low income specifically, yes. For community land trusts for affordable home ownership, yes, we need that. We need strengthening of low income and homelessness support. We need an all of the above approach. I mean, there are too many politicians and bureaucrats that are wanting to do like just one little piece of housing affordability. We need all of it. Take the entire toolbox and use it all.
Thank you. Mr. Ferranti.
It's a very close call in my view between housing issues and criminal justice issues. I will say that I think that we've lost 20,000 or so market rate affordable homes in Arlington over the last 20 years. So as you go from 80 or 90% of area median income down to less than 30% of area median income, affordability for those individuals, I think, is the biggest issue impacting our Black and brown residents. And we're losing, there's displacement in some parts of the west end of Columbia Pike for our Latino residents. And there's also all the way across Columbia Pike. Some of our residents I met with today from the ACE Collaborative are worried in Barcroft. So we have to invest more in affordable housing, and we have to invest in ways that are going to make the economic ladder work. DC just put $200 million into Black home ownership. We're not at a moment at this exact juncture where we have that amount of money. DC is in a virtuous economic circle, but we should do community land trusts, and we should do more subsidizing. And a community land trust is essentially a co-op way to do some of that subsidizing. But we also have to work really hard. 30% and below, we should commit, like the Arlington Community Foundation has asked us to commit, to 10% of our units being there. And we have to invest more in our CAS as well, committed affordable housing.
Thank you. And Ms. Clement.
Well, I agree with my colleagues that the greatest issue facing minorities in Arlington is housing. One of the few mechanisms by which minorities earning less than area median can hope to achieve ownership is through community land trusts. A community land trust, generally speaking, a nonprofit owns the land and the residents buy into the properties. Such an arrangement is needed here because due to the scarcity and proximity to metro, land values in Arlington are so grossly inflated that anything built on it is priced out of reach and low and moderate income families outright. Another thing that I would do is to increase the affordability for people of color would be to reinstate the tax credit for renovation of multifamily dwellings that was repealed by the county in its fiscal 2021 budget. While the tax credit would not enable wealth generation in the form of home ownership, it would incentivize landlords to provide more livable housing and thereby improve the quality of life for those who inhabit their units. The fact that 3/4 of the market rate affordable housing in the county disappeared in 20 years belies Arlington County's government's commitment to it. But don't take my word for it. I asked the NAACP and other fair housing advocates to submit FOIA requests to Arlington County Housing Division seeking inspection records for the few remaining market rate affordable apartments in the county.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. And this concludes the round of questions for the county board candidates. And we want to thank you all for joining us this evening. And I'll turn it over to President Spain.
Thank you, Wanda. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey, Adam, and Matt for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to be with us this evening. We had about 90 folks on this call that stuck around. And so while we want to wish you well, stay safe out there as you are on the campaign trail. And for all of our viewers, you've heard some of the comments tonight. get out there to learn more about them. I think we've also dropped their links to their campaigns in our chat. So all the best to each and every one of you. Have a good evening. We're going to get ready for the next panel.
NAACP, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So we're going to go over to our Political Action Committee. Jan Marie, you're ready to get this going? I think we have.
We're going to do the break or go right into it?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and give everyone, we'll get the spotlights going before, and then we'll give everyone at this moment, it's 8:25. We'll give everyone 2 to 3 minutes just to get up and stretch their legs and, use the restroom if you like, but we'll come back at 8:28. So is that fine, Wanda? 8:28?
Yes.
Okay. Is Jan Marie coming on, or are you're gonna have it from here, Wanda?
I'll take it from here.
Okay.
Just waiting for, okay. Welcome back, everyone. I'd now like to introduce the 2 candidates for school board, Bethany Sutton and James Vell Rives. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Again, for this portion, I'm going to ask a series of questions, and there will not be formal opening or closing statements. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Then we will jump in when your time is up. Again, we will rotate who answers each question first. So for our first question, before we get into the details on any one topic, let's fast forward ahead 4 years and imagine that you are reflecting back on your term on the school board. What single measurable achievement or accomplishment would you most like to see reflected in your tenure? And we'll start with Ms. Sutton.
Thank you, Wanda, and thank you to the NAACP for hosting the forum this evening. The thing that I most hope to accomplish is really making significant progress in moving the needle on the achievement gap for Black and Hispanic students, English learners, and students with disabilities, so that they are achieving outcomes on par with their peers. And I also think a lot about not just their academic outcomes, but their mental health. They're having a mentally and emotionally and developmentally healthy kids in our community who feel a strong sense of belonging and who see themselves in our curriculum, see themselves in the leadership in our system, see themselves at the front of the classroom and not just in the cafeteria or cleaning the floors. And I just want to see kids who are well positioned academically, socially, emotionally, developmentally, well positioned for success in their lives.
Thank you. Mr. Rives?
Yes, thank you, NAACP, for having us tonight. 4 years from now, I want to be looking back at academic achievement. I want to see that our students recovered lost learning and made significant gains, especially in reading and math. And this would be for all grade levels, all racial groups, English learners, students with disabilities. I want to see all measures for all groups going up. And this compared to fixed standards of proficiency, as well as compared to not so much students within Arlington compared with each other, but students in Arlington compared to Virginia as a whole, to Maryland and DC. These are going to be our graduates' competitors for their careers and jobs. And I want to see them all making gains against these other groups outside of Arlington.
Thank you. Our next question. If you had to score the Arlington school system as a whole as to how well it is serving the needs of communities of color, what score would you give on an A through F scale and why? And how do you perceive the state of affairs today? And we'll start with you, Mr. Rives.
I would, I'm sorry, the question, grade the schools now and the state of affairs today. Is there a difference? I didn't understand, I'm sorry.
Yes, how would you score? I'll read the question again.
Oh, okay, okay.
If you had to score the Arlington school system as a whole as to how well it is serving the needs of communities of color, what score would you give on an A through F scale and why? And how do you perceive the state of affairs today?
Mm-hmm. Specifically for serving communities of color, I would give APS a C-. I see that it is serving some of those students just fine, and others it's not serving them. I see an array of achievement. And what I want to do to rectify that is to give the students that need extra help to get up to their full potential, I want them to get it in the form of, whether that be tutoring, we need to make the tutoring program, we need to fund it into the future beyond the next, I believe it's only funded for 1 year. So I want to make that a budget priority. Math and literacy coaching. First, we could have those coaches be doing more direct to student work and relieve them of some of their administrative and consulting responsibilities. If kids need transportation to stay for extended day, we can provide that. If they need proctoring an extended day, that's not something that we're offering now. And family support. What's happening when the students are leaving Arlington Public Schools in the evening? How many adult eyes are on those kids? Are the students caring for a child, either their sibling or their own child? I've seen good examples of family support in the schools where I grew up in Birmingham. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton?
So I'm gonna go a little bit lower and say a D. I went to school where you had a slash, like D/D+. But I want to say the SOL data, if that is, you know, a significant benchmark and measure that that many people use, the SOL data for students of color is abysmal from this past year at least, and for many years. When you look at English reading, for example, 80% of all students in the 2021-22 school year had a pass rate of 80%, sorry. And for Black students, English reading is 67%. For math, pass rate for all students, 74%, pass rate for Black students, 56%. It's appalling, and we have to address it. And when you look at other indicators, so setting aside academics, but there's lots of data on academics. When you look at other indicators, like the from the school climate and culture report from last week about the disproportionality and suspension data, and I'm sure we're going to get to that topic, but I'll just say that is another place where we are failing our community in terms of kids of color.
That's time.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. What work do you see that remains to be done to achieve integrated schools? And what role should the school board play in this? And Ms. Sutton, we will start with you.
Sure. So I feel strongly that there is a lot of work to be done to integrate our schools. I came up with my kids at Randolph Elementary School, which is a school that's 10% white. And I know other schools, obviously, in the county have very disproportionate numbers of white kids versus Black kids versus Hispanic kids. And when you look at the socioeconomic status and the data, we have schools that are, 80% kids on free and reduced meals, and we have schools that are 5%. Those are elementary schools. Sorry, I should be more specific. 5% on free and reduced meals. So there is a lot that needs to be done to balance the demographics of our schools. And, one of the ways that people often go to in their minds is to talk about, well, we need to change boundaries, or we have to adjust boundaries for our school zones. And, that is a tool. That is one way that we can achieve more balance in demographics. I think we have to partner actively with the county around patterns in housing. And I'm curious to see if the missing middle proposal could balance diversity across our county a little better than we currently have it balanced, or than it's currently not balanced, I should say. But I think there's probably other things out there. I recently read about controlled choice policies in schools that are in places, I think, like Cambridge, Massachusetts. I don't know a whole lot about that. And maybe it's not something we would want to do, or things we could be exploring.
Thank you. And Mr. Rives?
Yes, I too see some examples of good, maybe even full integration in Arlington, like Hoffman Boston Elementary, where my daughter attended 1 year. There is no one predominant racial group there. It's really incredible. And Wakefield High School, where my daughter is now, I love the school spirit there. It's a very diverse school. You can just really feel the community, especially like at the football games, which proves it's not all about winning at Wakefield. But there is a lot of work to be done. And with the zoning, I know this is perhaps one of the toughest questions for the school board, but with zoning, I think we do need to maintain neighborhood schools to foster that community that I've seen, and that's so important. I would just say, if there are zoning blocks that could reasonably go to 2 or more schools, then I would want for racial, economic, and language diversity to be a priority in that case. So trying to do some of both, maintaining neighborhood schools and community, but also fostering diversity.
Thank you. And our next question, as Ms. Sutton began to respond to in her previous question. The next question, on October 13th, the APS Office of School Climate and Culture presented its monitoring report to the school board and highlighted the disproportionality in suspension rates by race, ethnicity, students identified with a disability, and English learners. What were your main takeaways from the report, and what would you do to ensure positive, meaningful, and relevant learning environments for all students? And we'll start with you, Mr. Rives.
Well, Mr. White gave an excellent presentation at that meeting, and I would really love the opportunity to be on the board and work with him specifically. And, you know, as I look at the data, there is a disparity in the suspensions was what he focused on. The solutions that were proposed, though, this is perhaps how I'm going to be different from the current board. The solutions were hiring three trauma specialists under student services, and then professional development. This is going to be $350,000 is the estimate. What I was talking about before of getting the help to the kids that need it, why not hire, instead of 3 specialists, why not 4 more counselors? Or instead of professional development, why not hire a classroom assistant who can assist a classroom teacher in a general ed setting with his or her special ed students in the class, like more direct student to student contact. Like I want to see more configurations of fewer staff working more closely with students rather than layers of staff that just scratch the surface and have minimal interaction with the students. So, you know, again, I want to go into where are the schools, the students that need the resources, and send them there rather than centralizing.
That's time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Sutton?
Sure. So my takeaways, and I attended the work session on last Tuesday, and then the school board meeting on Thursday of last week. Both nights this topic was covered. And I have to say that it's disheartening to see that data. It's also in some ways not surprising. And really what I feel is that I'm also seeing in the presentation of sort of information is that we are in the process of a culture shift in developing restorative practices in our schools, so that we're moving away from a sort of a traditional, somewhat punitive approach where accountability equates with punishment, to really looking at positive behavior interventions, a full sort of program of social emotional learning that helps student develop ways to, and has teachers working with kids and ways to sort of address underlying issues before they become behavioral problems. I know that we're doing a lot around sort of recognizing and addressing implicit bias, and thinking about how to develop trauma-informed practices in our schools and in our classrooms.
It's time.
Thank you. Next question. How do you understand achievement and opportunity gaps affecting APS, Arlington Public Schools, students of color? How would you solve them? Ms. Sutton.
Sure. So I've talked a lot about the achievement gap out on the campaign trail, because it is something that I feel really is a moral imperative. And I think that there's a lot of different ideas and strategies that we can employ, but we have a fundamental mission in our public schools to have equitable outcomes for our students. So, often we hear that an assumption that we're talking about lowering standards. And I'm really talking about elevating student learning, elevating learning for all students, and doing what works best for all students, and also deploying targeted resources to those students who need the most support in making academic progress. And by the way, I would say that the support that they might need to make academic progress might be more in the area of social emotional development, or in the identification of a learning disability that has gone undetected, or in addressing a mental health issue, or addressing a trauma that they have experienced or are experiencing in school. So I think we have to set high expectations for student learning. But then I think there's a whole lot of things that we could be doing around those early interventions, identifying learning disabilities, having small group work and one-on-one interventions, looking at the data to see what is working, where it's working, what could be scaled up from where it's working, what's not working.
That's time.
Thank you. Mr. Rives?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. How do you understand achievement and opportunity gaps affecting Arlington Public School students of color, and how would you resolve them?
Yes, well, I understand them to exist for starters. I see that they have really widened with the pandemic and the virtual learning. That was really hard for those groups, more so than for white students that were doing virtual learning during that time. The way that I would address them, I've already mentioned, it's very meat and potatoes. It's budget priorities of getting classroom teachers in front of those kids, funding classroom teachers, literacy coaches, transportation funding after school, proctoring, and those are my ideas. But I think the question is, has the current school board been serving this community well? And for 15 years, every seat has been filled with candidates from the Democratic School Board Caucus. So how many more years do you want them to have? And I'm eager to work with the current board. And I think that for them to have one voice from outside their circle on the board, we can all have a lot more confidence in the governing process. I think the board could be a lot more effective with me on the board, being that different voice, different viewpoints, different ideas from outside their circle.
Thank you, Mr. Rives. Our next question. Do you agree with the school board vote last year to physically remove school resource officers from schools? How will you ensure that the remaining relationship and the memorandum of understanding doesn't result in a backdoor way of retaining school resource officers by a different name at a different location? And we will begin with you, Mr. Rives.
Well, I thought that decision was the worst decision of the year for the school board. I want to bring the resource officers back into school. I've been campaigning in every school district in the county, and what I'm hearing from families, this includes Black families and Hispanic families, they want the officers back. They didn't want them to go. APS, Arlington Public Schools' own study, the Panorama Survey of 2020 on school climate, every demographic group felt safer with the school resource officers in school. That's every racial group, parents, students, English learners, disabilities, high school, elementary, you can look at it, every single group, most of those surveyed felt safer with the officers in their school. And this is what the county wants. The board was out of touch and made the wrong decision. The second half of your question doesn't apply, since it was about how will I keep them out of the schools. So.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton?
Sure. So I support the board's decision to remove the school resource officers from our schools. I will say the 2020 survey that Mr. Rives, Dr. Rives is citing does indicate that, generally speaking, slightly more than half of secondary students and their families feel safer at that moment in time. They felt safer. But feeling safer is not the same as being safer. And we really can only hold that data as a general indicator about how people feel. and not as a directive for our school system about having SROs in our schools. There is extensive research that demonstrates that schools are not inherently safer due to the presence of an SRO. Further, it's documented in multiple studies that there are disproportionately negative impacts for students of color related to the presence of officers in our schools. We fundamentally need an all hands on deck approach in our schools where everyone is working together to provide the strategies and supports that students need so that we're addressing underlying issues before they rise to a level of a safety concern or something that would need any engagement with law enforcement. In addition to teachers, counselors, psychologists, administrators, APS now has a team of school safety coordinators. And I think that across the board, all of those individuals can help with any behavioral issues or responding if there's something that might need to be referred to law enforcement. And the decision about SROs was informed by an extensive engagement process with a lot of people involved in it.
That's time.
Over and over that there were many functions that SROs were providing, such as
That's time.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Okay, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. Thank you. Next question.
Madam Secretary?
Yes.
I did want to jump in and at this time and ask a question, as president. And what better time to ask this question than right now, as y'all talking about SROs. And this is going to go to both of you, Ms. Sutton and Mr. Rives. So I'm listening to both of your reply, and I'm sure you're quite aware of the work that the NAACP at the national level, the state level by way of a national proclamation change, even at the local level. So the question to both of you is, do you believe police officers need to be inside the school system, inside of a school building to make the school safe? And I think I know what your answer is, Ms. Babe, I'm trying to be neutral. Because depending on how you answer this question, that means you're gonna counter with the community and an extensive process by which you say we went through, and also ACPD, who said that they can make the school safe from not being inside the building. But go ahead, do they have to be in the building there, Ms. Sutton, to make it safe?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, Mr. Rives?
Yes, they do.
Tell us why.
Well,
what is your data? Where are you getting this from?
well, we already mentioned the Panorama survey. It's interesting now that Bethany is talking about it's more about physical safety than feeling safe. That's usually my line, but I want them to feel safe as well. Also, we've come back to school, there's more fights, fireworks. Wakefield had like trash can fires every other day for a couple of weeks. I just don't think that would be happening if we had our SROs back in the building. And kids are afraid to go to school. They weren't afraid before the pandemic.
Okay. And I may be reaching here a little bit, and I just want you to answer this with all honesty, both of you. I'll tell you what, for me, Bethany, when you went to school back in the days, whenever that was, probably just a few years ago, did you have an SRO in your school?
No.
Did you, Mr. Rives?
Not inside the school. We had them at school events. So they would be.
Yes.
No, that's still.
No, well, hold on.
But see,
No,
we
I'm
would
just
have
asking
them
you a
on
question.
the property. So your question's not a yes or no question.
No,
We had SROs. We didn't call them that. I think we would call it police. We had police on the campus at various times. Now that can't even happen in our current memorandum of understanding with ACPD. So
well, ACPD doesn't have enough police officers to field football games these days. That's what they say.
Right, and that's because
all right, so
that's because we haven't valued our police. They're demoralized. They've gone off to other places where they can work with kids like they wanted to do and like they're trained to do.
So, Mr. How has we as a community, and I know you're running for office, but I'm really concerned, how have we devalued police officers?
Well, I mean, we saw that with the defund the police movement, with the protests going on.
So, Mr. Reed, did you also witness a man get killed in broad daylight by the police?
Yes, I did.
So look, we've taken our position. Just want to see where you're at. I think we know where you're going to be at. I asked my question. I'm going to turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you for your time, and I wish y'all the best. Thank you.
Thank you,
much.
JD.
Welcome.
All right, we are down to our last two questions. The next question, how will you maintain or strengthen support of LGBTQ+ students, families, and staff in APS, Arlington Public Schools? And we'll start with Ms. Sutton.
Sure. So this has been a hot topic lately. And I will share that I'm deeply concerned about the impact of the governor's proposed new policies targeting our LGBTQ+ youth. And as a school board member, I will be committed to continuing and improving APS's efforts to provide an inclusive and supportive environment for all of our students. LGBTQ+ students are much more likely than their peers not to earn a high school diploma, which is an unacceptable outcome for a school system. The drivers for that include conditions that we work to mitigate for every other student, things like homelessness, bullying, harassment, hostile environments, exclusion, lack of support. All students benefit from policies and practices that promote dignity and a sense of belonging. I think our schools need to be safe spaces where students can explore who they are, and teachers and educators, principals and staff members are trusted adults for kids. And I think that while parents should be partners with our schools in the education of children, it's critical that our community comes together supporting teachers, the role of teachers and staff in educating our children, and supporting the mental and emotional health, in particular, of our LGBTQ+ students.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. And Mr. Rives?
I want every student to be welcomed and treated with respect and kindness. I also want every child to get the best professional care available when needed. If there is bullying going on in any school for any reason, there should be negative consequences for that.
Thank you. And our final question for this evening. What new qualities, experiences, or perspectives would you bring to the board compared to our existing and prior boards? Can we expect business as usual or any transformation in your contributions? Mr. Rives.
No, there won't be business as usual, because on the board, I would be the first person not out of the Democratic School Board Caucus in 15 years. I am a physician and a mental health professional. I'm a psychiatrist. I think that perspective is especially important right now, both with if we have more infectious disease kind of concerns or other crises. I think I can be really helpful in navigating that and keeping the students in person, but safely, but it's crucial that they be in person. And I think I will give the board more credibility. I'm not going to disagree with them on everything. I agreed with the board in their decision to discontinue the virtual learning program. I think they should be focusing on in-person instruction. So when there is agreement, I think I will bring strength. When there's disagreement, I will bring dissenting voices and different views, different viewpoints that are not being heard on the current board. So I think it's win-win all around.
Thank you. And Ms. Sutton?
Thanks for that question. I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. First of all, I have a professional background that's in higher education and leadership development, and I believe I would be the only board member who's done 25 years working in higher education. And so I come at teaching and learning and student development and pedagogy and all of those pieces around student learning with that sort of higher ed lens. I also work as a leadership coach, which means I'm literally trained in listening. And I do believe that as a board member, I would be somebody who would be accessible and be a very good listener to the community. And then I guess the last piece I would say is that I spent 7 years on the PTA board 3 years as president, 4 years on the board of a Title I elementary school in Arlington. Highly diverse, a lot of needs in the community, and poor outcomes for students, poor test scores, a lot of challenges, a lot of teachers who worked incredibly hard to serve those kids, and a lack of resources in the PTA. So I have this lens in which I feel very passionate about the value of diversity, and I feel a huge sense of commitment about equity and inclusion. And those are my values.
Well, thank you both for joining us this evening.
Excuse me, Madam President, Madam Secretary. We got one more, okay? Because we need to know this as the NAACP. We're at this point, Ms. Sutton and James. And James, you brought up a great point about the type of control of the school board as it relates to political parties. The NAACP is a nonpartisan organization. And as many of you on this call know, we, over the past year, have looked closely at the current process that yields individuals that are get into the school board process, where we at today, right? Past the primary, going to caucus, and they're here. The current school board caucus, the way it's presented, and James, you can chime in as well. Do you support it, or does it need to be modified? Or taken away altogether, removed?
I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm an independent.
Sure, but what are your thoughts on the process that as it is right now and your competitors here?
I'd say it's not working because the board that it's producing is out of touch with the electorate.
Okay, Bethany?
So JD, what were my options again?
Well, you're a product of the process. So tell us, do you think it needs to be removed altogether, the caucus process, or you support the current form as it is? There was a lot of discussion earlier this year on this, and we want to know because
well, you know what? So I will say I don't feel like the current form really exists because we didn't have a caucus this spring, right?
Well, look,
there was talk about amending it,
okay.
but that didn't happen. So I don't feel like it's been tested in any kind of amended form.
Well, do you believe the process, the one you did participate in, because you didn't have a candidate, right? To go up against a competitor, and it has not been changed to our knowledge. So should it be changed? The process?
Yeah, I think it should be changed.
What?
I think it should be made substantial. If it's going to continue at all, it should be made substantially more inclusive. I think there are a lot of ways. I think there should be electronic voting. I think there's all kinds of things that were discussed this past winter, were put on the table. I think the Arlington Dems had some of those in the works, maybe not all of them. I wish that we had seen it play out.
Yes, thank you. And I have to bring that up because I would do these members of the NAACP an injustice not to ask you that question, to ask James his opinion, because the positions that you're going in per state law are what? Nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan, yeah.
But one and many have argued that we have to have this political tilt, putting our hand in the cookie jar pretty much to, put a person forward who possesses or have democratic values or live to those. Be that as it may, there's a conversation going on in this community, and I think it will continue to go on.
And it should.
Right, but conversations also need to come to a conclusion, and we need to take a giant step in a new direction, right? In order to build a very inclusive community and electorate. So thank you for that. And I think that Madam Secretary, thank you for moderating tonight. We're going to turn it back over in the good hands of our Political Action Committee. Again, thank you, James. Thank you, Bethany. Y'all have best of times the next couple of weeks, and I'm out of here for right now.
Thank you, JD. Wanda, enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much to the candidates. Thank you so much to everyone in the audience for joining today. And a big, big thank you to Wanda for her awesome moderation. If we just give her a big virtual round of applause. So just as a reminder, a recording of this event will be available on our YouTube page in the coming days. So be sure, please look out for that. But thank you so much again to everyone, and I will pass it back to our president. Thank you.
Well, I want to, thank you, Jean-Marie, for taking this on. As many of you may not know, Jean-Marie has been on our political action committee for a number of years. She's been working behind the scenes. I think Jamie and Megan are both here, but we were kind of like threw in the fire and said, you could do this, you can make it happen. And great job tonight. Great job putting this all together. It was definitely a team effort. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for stepping up and moderating. We did do something a little different this year. We have enough experts here in this branch of the NAACP that we can kind of put some things together. Notwithstanding, we've had great forums in the past, hosted by folks like Wilma Jones, Sean Perryman, and a few others. Those were outstanding. But Wanda, you did a terrific job tonight. So let's all give her a virtual hand clap or some kudos. So with that being said, that will conclude this month's meeting. Again, pay strict attention to your emails on or around November 17th, because National NAACP will be sending you the ballot for elections. And we'll come back here in November for our November meeting. I think we have Moms Demand Action teed up to come in for presentation. We have the VFW 3150, and I believe we also have Dory Miller coming in to present. So a couple of organizations you may have heard of before, but we want to give them the opportunity to also speak to the members of the NAACP. And with that being said, thank you. Have a good evening. The meeting is now adjourned. I just need a few people to stay on. Thank you.